All right, good morning, and welcome to Cafecito con Colón. Glad you're with us on this beautiful Saturday morning of Juneteenth weekend. We have got a great lineup for you today, a lineup of one, but he is unbelievable. Absolutely one of the most trusted voices in the Southwest when it comes to Black voices who make a difference every single day. And we are grateful that he was able to join us today as he was rescheduled from last week. So we're glad he was able to stick with us today on this beautiful Saturday morning. Hakim Bellamy.
Hello, Senor Auditor. Thank you for having me. Thanks for rescheduling me too.
Hey, are you kidding? I'd meet you anytime, anywhere. All right. It's exactly 9 o'clock and we are good to go. So I am gonna start posting up some links here that you should check out after Cafecito con Colón. There you go. Look at that nice mug he's got. I got my Cafecito con Colón mug as well.
Yes.
Good morning, Alfonso. Kenny Crow, good morning. Good morning, Breezy Bree. You are amazing, and I'm in your corner. You know that, Bree. Bree is walking the walk, talking that talk all the time, but she puts it out there. Not just when it's easy, but more importantly, when it's hard. Thanks, Bree. All right. Love you too. We emancipate, we proclamate. There you go. That's Hakim Bellamy's most recent post on his Facebook page. Check out Hakim Bellamy, AKA Hakim B. Boy, I'm coming off a great night. We went up to Gallup, or I went up to Gallup last night solo to go support that great community in their outreach and bringing the community together. And it was a wonderful trip, and glad to be back. And you can check out my posts from last night and this morning to see some of the great pictures of the mural they did, and just fantastic community gathering. Good morning, Sri. Good morning, Ivan. Great to see you this morning. Let me get started right away. It is 9:02, and we are going to put up a bunch of links this morning because we got so much to celebrate, reflect, and discuss. But we are on this Juneteenth Saturday, fantastic day yesterday in Albuquerque, coming together on Civic Plaza. Unfortunately, I was honoring Frank Gallegos, my dear friend and mentor from Valencia County in the South Valley. I was honoring him in his funeral and providing a eulogy there. So I wasn't able to be with my friends and stand as an ally on the Civic Plaza as they did an amazing piece. And congratulations to Mike and to Hakim and to all the great folks, Chad, and everybody that's driving that great outreach and effort here in Albuquerque for these peaceful protest statements and visual opportunities to provide a visual depiction of some of the messages that the Black Lives Matter movement is trying to communicate, and really giving us a great chance for reflection and growth. And so it's also Father's Day weekend, so I don't want to miss the opportunity to celebrate that. And as you know, I did our Brian's Angels with Team Chisholm, phenomenal care package outreach program. But I love this story in the CNN page about the Dovetail Project by Sheldon Smith, who for a decade already has been helping young African-American fathers better their lives and the lives of their children. So I wanted to post up that very inspirational story, because it was a great opportunity to also promote a local nonprofit that I love. I started loving the local nonprofit when it was part of PB&J here in Albuquerque. Good morning, Lynn. Good morning, Christina, and good morning, Donna, and all the great folks who have joined us this morning. Hakim, on this Saturday, you're already drawn about 50 folks live right here on Cafecito con Colón. But I was telling you about the local group and that is Fathers Building Futures.
Mm-hmm.
And I've lost that link, but I'm going to find it. And don't you worry, we'll get it up there. I got so many links open here, I can't even see straight this morning. Lots of great stuff to celebrate. CNN was crushing it. They did a great job of covering Malala's graduation from Oxford. She says now that she graduated, she's going to have some time for some Netflix. So I've got some great suggestions on Netflix, like Dave Chappelle's 826. Check that out. If you haven't seen that yet, check it out. Very, very important. Here's my Fathers Building Futures link that I want you to learn about. A great, great New Mexico nonprofit, homegrown, tremendous model. I've met some incredible men through that program. Started PB&J, now it's its own independent 501c3, but it assists in the success journey of men who have been incarcerated and assisting in providing support for reintegration and deep impact in a positive way in our community. So check out Fathers Building Futures. Plus, if you need a Father's Day gift, I don't know if they're open on Saturdays, but they do great. They've got all kinds of things. Like for a while, they were building coffins for, in particular, the Jewish community. They were doing some coffins that were for Orthodox and for conservative Jews. They were compliant with the oversight necessary to build those coffins, but that's kind of morbid. But they also do phenomenal artwork and trinkets and woodwork and things like that. So you can check out their good work at that website that I just posted for Fathers Building Futures. So check them out. And let's see here. What else do I have open here? Oh yeah, this was cool. So one of the things that went viral in the last few days is Vogue's opportunity to put your own face on the cover, and the beautiful faces that were put on the cover there, in particularly one of this incredible Black woman with very stark eyeshadow or bright eyeshadow. Stark's not the right word, but contrasting colors, absolutely beautiful. Great interview with the editor, I think it was, of Vogue. So check that out. Again, on the Father's Day, this Father's Day is a little different. As fathers, we all, well, not all of us, but I certainly have thought about George Floyd, his murder, and not just his child who was left behind, who I'll never forget, on the shoulders, I think, of her uncle, who said that my daddy changed the world. And in fact, I think we've all come to realize that what I've been praying for the last few weeks, that this is not a flashpoint, but yet a tipping point for us learning more so that we could know better and do better and be better. I think her daddy did change the world. Unfortunately, he had to give his life, like so many other Black men who won't be here to celebrate Father's Day with their children. Yeah, sorry about that. Let me try and get back to where I was here. Here's in USA Today, again, another great story here about honoring and celebrating Father's Day during this very heavy time. And during this Juneteenth weekend, where it is a celebration, this Jubilee. And I know that Hakim is going to speak a little bit about that. And Devante's done a great job of promoting Juneteenth's celebration here in Albuquerque. And you can find that information on my page too, and Hakim's feed and Devante's feed for the celebrations and opportunities to engage and learn this weekend on Father's Day weekend, which is also Juneteenth. Edward Bellamy says, if nothing else, he changed all of us, I hope. And indeed he did. So Hakim, who's this Edward fella?
That's me.
Oh,
that's Edward is my first name. It's also my father's name, who I'm coming up on the year anniversary of his passing.
I remember.
And I had taken almost a 18-month hiatus off of Facebook. It wasn't good for me. And then when I came back to Facebook, I was using my government name, as we call it. Hakim is my official middle name on my birth certificate, but I used Edward just because I was trying to. It was really around the time of my dad's passing that I was trying to get the word out to my family about it, because in the past you would mail invitations You mail invitations to people to invite them to a funeral. It's not quite that world anymore. So I hop back on in a utilitarian fashion, and I'm still here. So under Eddie now.
Well, my goodness, you are a complicated man, sir. You're very complicated.
Yeah. The other page, the Hakim Bellamy page, like when I buried it, was really just like at the beginning of my career. A lot of that was my just kind of like my political, like, views out there in the world. And as my career began to grow, I had other platforms in which to express those views. And I was getting concerned that I had too many friends that were actually trolls. So it was a good time to like reset and say, who are people that I actually know when I hit the
I know that feeling.
Right?
I know that feeling, bro. I got to tell you, I often am jealous of Aleli because she has a very narrow universe of friends on Facebook. And literally at night, she can scroll through and see updates that are important from all of her friends. But as you know, on your personal page, you end up with 5,000 friends. Yes. If you are at all public, and so you never really get the value of being able to stay engaged with your true friends via Facebook because there's so much traffic.
Absolutely, and that's what happened. I was fortunate enough to have a following and a fan base where I hit my 5,000 person max, and so I was also like, this is a bit much. I need to spend more time in the present.
Like, agree. Totally understand. So I put up a bunch of links just now because I want to just get to Hakim. Last couple here. I want to put up another. I haven't done a good enough job of celebrating the National Museum of African American History and Culture, of which Aleli and I are tiny founding donors, I think. Nice. And it's a beautiful, beautiful museum, both architecturally and internally. So check that out. But there's a good page to land on there. And then I posted up all the Albuquerque celebration. Many of you probably already know Albuquerque officially recognized Juneteenth. 47 states, I think 47 or 46 states that officially recognize Juneteenth as a holiday. There's a movement to nationalize the holiday. And of course, I'm on board with that, and have been promoting that this week. And let's see, I also posted another story I think about that I was touched by. It made me think of Stephanie, beautiful Stephanie Tejas, who's about to have a baby soon, but also does a lot of good work in the space of trying to tell the story of families who are dealing with Alzheimer's patients in their homes. And this conversationalist piece really touched me. So I hope you will take a look at that. All right, here we go. It is 9:12 and I'm getting to Hakim Bellamy right now. I just want to say that we pumped the brakes yesterday in Albuquerque, so please keep track and updated on the most recent updates for the COVID-19 pandemic. And then I am going to post who has become, I've kind of got a, I don't know, maybe a literary crush on Dr. Kendi, but I'm just going to post his piece from almost a year ago. But he talks and has talked for a very long time about being anti-racist and not an anti-racism, as opposed to just being able to say, I'm not a racist. So with that, let me talk to you a little bit about Hakim Bellamy. He has served New Mexico and Albuquerque in so many capacities. He is one of the most trusted voices. He is one of the most recognizable individuals. I mean, this is a guy who came to Albuquerque, came to New Mexico, and quickly became one of Albuquerque's and New Mexico's most notables. And it's really fantastic to have known him. This is a guy for so long and really enjoyed being a part of his journey in a very small way. And he's been a part of my journey in a very big way. He has inspired me in so many times, so many ways that it's hard to recount. But he started out, I think as a grad student, probably 15 years ago at KUNM. I think On the Air was his beginning here in Albuquerque as this phenomenal presence, I should say. And I think that's kind of where I first heard about him and learned of him. And our paths crossed frequently since then because he has been all about engagement and whether that's voter engagement, youth engagement, Black engagement, diversity conversations, getting us all to think more and question our surroundings. And he is so multi-talented, and he is Albuquerque's very first poet laureate. That has been a platform for him to be able to communicate in spectacular ways. I have posted throughout a picture of your book, which I need to make sure I post one of those links. But he's written a book. He's done a great job. He's a father of Caleb. I think Caleb is now 12 or 13. Is Caleb a teenager yet?
He's knocking at the door. He's knocking at the door of teenagerdom. He's 12.
I know he's your pride and joy, and he's also like a fish in the Rio Grande is what I saw most recently.
Yeah, he's got gills and lungs. Apparently. He's knocking at the door. He's knocking at the door of teenagerdom. He's 12.
All right, he is right on the edge. He's about to be a teenager, and he's beyond his years. I can tell you that. He's just a phenomenal young boy. Every time I get a chance to interact with him, he's always got a smile, and he looks me in the eye, and it's just an inspiring young man. Let me be a little more specific about Hakim's incredible work. He's done boards and grant panels, and he's worked with lots of organizations, whether it's the NEA or, just countless organizations. He's got a master's in communications from UNM. He's also done some great work as a fellow with the Kellogg Foundation, which has been a great kind of investor and stakeholder in Albuquerque, which has been such a tremendous partnership. And it may have started a long, long time ago, but I think it became very prominent when they took a deep dive with people like Robin Brule and Mayor Berry and the Albuquerque Community Foundation and so many partner stakeholders. And they've made a phenomenal investment. And one of the best ones I think they've made, and reflecting, I think they would agree, is the investment they made in having Hakim be a fellow of the Kellogg Foundation. He had that collection of poems that I was talking about. I'll let him talk about his book a little bit. But this is really one of the things I read that just touched me and I thought was really captured your work. It says, Bellamy moves from a free-thinking attitude of deliverance to a provocative new space where the reader can reflect on the poet's inquisition of the 1% working class life in urban and rural America and the transcendent value of hip hop as one of our top exports and global contributions. Holy cow.
Wow.
That is unbelievable.
What are they talking about?
I am just so thrilled and honored to have you on Cafecito con Colon, Hakim. You've inspired me regularly. You're a dear friend. You make me think. And I think that's, there's no higher compliment than that, being able to say, you make me think. And I appreciate that. And you're a trusted voice, a dear friend. Welcome, Hakim Bellamy, to Cafecito con Colon.
Thank you. I call Brian Senior Auditor, but I know Brian since he was heaping mounds of praise upon me. I'm not going to take another 10 minutes. I could go 20 or 30, but when I first met Brian, he was already an established star, soon to be the party chair for the Democratic Party for the state. And then through his other iterations and campaigns, was it lieutenant governor? Was that? Yeah, yes. And so, and just being able to be on board and support you and show up at events that you were at, try to put, when I had a couple pennies, try to put a couple pennies towards your campaigns. And then you've just always made yourself available to me, which I appreciate. And during your mayoral run, even helping me help me have a seat at some tables that I otherwise would not have been invited to have me in the room. And all of that is part of my journey too. And so just being able to, so many people you mentioned when you were doing introductions have invested in me. I've had, it's my responsibility to return the favor. And I don't think they want me to return the favor to them. I think they want me to return the favor by putting that work into the community. And so thank them for paying it forward to me. And I try to pay it forward as well. I know one of the things that the early conversations, it's kind of a running joke for the past few years of whether I would like run for office, and I'm still emphatically saying no, just so
Right.
you guys know. Just so let's just say that on the air.
Just
No, not planning on it. But you know, I had an opportunity to work for the state for a little bit, opportunity to work for Mayor Berry for a little bit in his philanthropy unit, and then Tim asked me to come back, and I suppose a third time's a charm. But
hey, real quick, because I failed to mention your leadership role at Cultural Affairs, and that's my error, and I'm sorry. Please put a spotlight on that opportunity Tim gave you, Mayor Keller gave you, because I'm so glad that I think it's one of those things where look, Hakim Bellamy is one of those rare birds in New Mexico that it didn't matter who was going to be mayor of the city of Albuquerque. There wasn't a single one of us that wasn't smart enough to know that whatever it took, we were going to make sure that you stayed at the table in leadership in Albuquerque. But tell us about that opportunity that the mayor gave you now.
Sure. The mayor invited me to be the deputy director of Cultural Services Department for the city of Albuquerque. And, you know, even after my previous experience in government, you know, I was having, let's just say I was having much more fun as a writer and an artist. And I was teaching at the time too at the Mexico School for the Arts. And young people give me life, and they make my writing better, frankly. Yeah, you know, I felt like an opportunity to really help the city move forward. And of course, the current movements for social change and justice are causing the city to move forward even faster. But just feeling like it was a moment that I could push, and it mattered that I was at the table instead of someone else. Yeah, I gave up my life of an artist and waking up whenever I wanted to be up and at 'em from like 8 to 8 every day in service of my community. But again, you were one of the early people that were, you were like, if you're gonna lead, it's not enough just to like have the ideas. It's like you want the ideas to be implemented, you know. And I feel like the big challenge and growth for me in this position was I was never short on ideas. Anybody who's listened to my work, and I always had an opinion about what I thought the government should do and what our community should do. And so it was kind of a put up or shut up moment. Like, it's easy to say what we should be doing. Are you willing to go do it? And so that's where I find myself these days. So
that's beautiful. And we are so fortunate to have you in leadership at this time. And I don't think any of us could have anticipated how important it was going to be to have people with lived experience that can actually bring a voice to the conversation that was going to be so critical as we are now, because of us being hopefully at that turning point, or at that tipping point, as I've called it the last couple of weeks, instead of a flashpoint. That we've had so many flashpoints on this journey of violence against Black men that we've all watched, but we've talked about for a week or two or 30 days, and then we're on to the next story, and nothing changes structurally, and nothing really has pierced our hearts and our souls as much as George Floyd's 8 minutes and 26-second journey to death, where he called for his mother, who he had buried. And so I'm just grateful you are where you are, because it has now morphed into a bigger conversation about not just cultural competency, but leading us to a place of deeper empathy, and which takes us to where I want you to go to maybe start, which is a concept that you rolled out long ago in an interview called radical empathy. And maybe you can speak to that radical empathy that you try and convey, and that you help others try and identify within themselves.
Definitely. No, thanks for reminding me of that. Yeah, that was a long time ago. I did not coin that term. I'm sure I borrowed it, and I feel like that's what was early in my my studies of nonviolence, nonviolent protests, just becoming a student of the civil rights movement, not exclusive to King, but King obviously was a figurehead of that movement, and really digging into his reading. I mean, annually I do a poem about MLK on MLK Day at Amyville High School, one of my favorite schools in town, because of their social justice curriculum and community engagement curriculum. But you know, the more you learn about King and who his teachers were, it really moves you to a space of saying, how do you show compassion? Like, you know, and that was his whole thing. Like, and that's where him and him and Malcolm X and him and Black Panther Party for Self-Defense were a little bit at odds, but he was like, if I can't show the compassion and the empathy, then I can't demand it, right? You know, and so it was a different approach. Neither one was right or wrong. In fact, you needed both. You needed the inside-outside game to get into the White House, as Bobby and Jack Kennedy. Right. So you kind of need the people outside making noise. You need the people inside coming from working towards the same goal, just with a different tactic. But that radical empathy idea was just that, like, you know, what I've always been fascinated how we as a people, regardless of all that's been done to us, can still find a way to care for other people's children. I mean, to that extent, right? Like, you know, in a way where they trust us along with their kids, but the tables wouldn't be turned, right? You know, except for the occasional, you know, Bradgelina, and they can adopt a child and all that good stuff. But you're just like, you know, we've really held the nation together at times when we could have let it fall apart. Yeah, there could have been the race wars that they talk about, but that's not who we are as a people, even though sometimes messaged that way. Black on black crime and those kind of things that always depict Black folk as violent people. And so I've always just been fascinated with that strength. And it is radical empathy. And it's not just patience, because, you know, it's no longer time to wait, but it is a time to really, really feel and have compassion for the people who are on the other side. And frankly, I've sometimes even said it as just feeling sorry for them, because as the kids say, they're not living their best life. And that hate will age you. It will hurt you. It will put you in an early grave, like, you know. And yeah, and so we find a way to kind of exist. We still find a way to have joy. I read an amazing poem yesterday on Split This Rock about by a poet named Justice Amir. And it's got one of these amazing lines, like, you know, make sure you still find your joy when the revolution bell rings. Like, you know, that's radical too, right? But love is radical too. And so, yeah, those are my incoherent thoughts on all of that. But I want to say, first of all, just a friendly correction. The Black Lives Matter action yesterday was Mike Silva and Charles Ashley. I'm Charles
sorry.
III. And I actually couldn't be there because I was busy being a city employee. But it was beautiful, and they also employed help from definitely We Are This City, and I can't remember the other group. Mothership alumni. And so and what's great about Mothership alumni is that they're younger than Charles and Mike and I. Like, it's just like, and that's what's been so exciting about this movement. I feel like, to your point of I too came in skeptical. Like, I've been through 3 Black Lives Matters movements now. My off color, no pun intended, joke has been, you know, we do this every 2 years. We do this every 2 years, and we get up in arms about the death of a Black person at the hands of the state. And we post stuff and we feel better because we're not racist. It's always someone else. It's always the police. And until America says we are racist, like, everybody under the sound of my voice, we're racist. Like, now we can actually deal with it. It's like saying I'm an alcoholic, and until you say it, you will not get better, right? You know. And so it feels like that's happening, not necessarily through the bravery of us older generations, but through the bravery of younger generations who are also on their 3 strikes, you're out, like, you know. But they tried to talk to us about gun violence, and we patted them on the head and sent them home. They tried to talk to us about climate change. I had the pleasure of being at the climate change march in DC last year. Young people of all colors and all sorts. And we patted them on the head and we sent them home as we left the Paris Climate Agreement. And so this is like number 3, and they're like, we're not leaving. Like, we're going to stay in the streets until you pay attention to us. And frankly, in the time since the last 2 movements, some of us can actually vote now. Some of us can actually run for office now, and we're not playing anymore. Like, you know, and I've been to 3 or 4 of the BLM rallies here. Plan on going to one today, and I've just been struck at how young the lead organizers are, and that's given me hope. They're like clearly 10 or more years younger than me, and I'm like, yeah, that makes me feel like it's going to be different this time. So.
I think that's absolutely right. And CA3, no lack of love coming from me. Charles Ashley, you know I love you. I'm sorry that I didn't mention you for yesterday. And thank you, and Mike, for including me in the private invitations for the events that preceded yesterday. And then, of course, yesterday was more public invitation. I've been honored to stand with you, and unfortunately wasn't able to do that yesterday.
You were with me 2 Thursdays ago. We were in Nob Hill. You were with me in Nob Hill. That was their second action. Yeah, that was the second.
It was their second action. Thank you for mentioning that. Yes, I was proud to stand with you then, as I'm on my journey to be a better ally and to stand with you, regardless of. And don't be distracted, folks. Like I'm getting all this interesting. I'm getting email, and some could call it hate mail, and there's this divisiveness out there that people always try and bring to the conversation to try and dissipate the movement, or to water down, or to maybe, I don't know what the right word is, but you know, there are so many that want to bring to the Black Lives Matter. Look, the movement is what it is today, received by the voices that are speaking to me today, right? Like, if you want to talk about anti-Semites who have been involved in the Black Lives Matter movement, I'm not interested. Like, I'm interested in the way the conversation is being held today. Yes, I am Jewish, and yes, I have stood tall against anti-Semitism my whole life, and yes, it's offensive. But I don't care about the historical comments of one or two people involved in the movement. What I care about is the people that I get to stand with today, and for the values and the conversation that they are trying to advance today. So let me just be clear in that, because I've been getting it for a week now. You know, we've been doing these Black Trusted Voices for almost 3 weeks now. And for the last week, all of a sudden I've been getting hit, and I don't know, it's not slowing me down, folks. Like I have grown. Like, you can't take me back. Like, you can't unbirth me. I am here, and I can't be deterred in my desire to be a better ally, and a desire to stand with folks, whether it's in McKinley County like I did last night, or whether it's with Charles Ashley III and Mike Silva a week or two ago in Nob Hill, or here on Cafecito con Colon, where I have only had Black Trusted Voices for the last near 3 weeks. So there, how you like them apples? Right,
let them know. That's right. You know, and you're right, Brian, in that is it's a classic red herring move. It's a classic way to distract. Those tactics tend to work very well in shallow conversations like the one that happened in social media worlds, where you can fire off a remark, but without taking incoming, without receiving, and so it's like one-way conversation in a bullhorn, and everybody has their own. And so my answer to that, because I hear it too, is always, so we're calling for frankly a reimagined. Some are saying defund, I'm saying refund a police department. We're calling for new kind of leadership at municipal, state, and national levels. And our premise is that, you know, leaders are flawed. Like, leaders are flawed. They're not perfect. Mm-hmm. Well, neither are ours. And so that doesn't, you know, the people who really are having this visceral and violent reaction to maintaining the status quo because it has benefited them, are basically throwing out arguments that or aspersions that if they were cast back at them, they could not defend. And so I'm supposed to walk away from this movement because our leaders are broken. Well, I'm asking you to do the same thing. And we're saying that the established leaders are also broken, right? And so, like, if you're not fighting for this, then you're fighting against this, and you're fighting for something else. And typically it means to maintain a situation of comfort, right? These aren't easy conversations to have. I've been calling it the awakening, as you've called it the tipping point, but I have called it the awakening because I feel like the more sustained that this conversation happens, then person by person, because of social media, give social media its credit, we do have this more emotional impact because of the people that we actually know who we're connected with. And families are having conversations that they frankly avoid at the Thanksgiving table because of this sustained time. Like, over time, like, you can avoid it for a week, you can avoid it for 2 weeks. It's hard to avoid for a month. It's hard to avoid for 3 months, right? And that's where the people get really uncomfortable and they start to squirm and get a little squeamish. And that's where, you know, we ask as Black folk, not speaking about for all Black people, but as a Black community, that's where we ask our allies to, like, buckle up, like just double down. like, because it's getting to the point where we have fatigue, and it's tiring. I have fatigue from being a Black man for 42 years and not seeing the relationship between my community and law enforcement like change zero in that time, right? And so that's fatigue too. And so if I can do it for 42 years, y'all can do it for 4 months. We're all right. We're gonna be all right. So
I agree 100% and well stated. And thank you for helping us continue to learn and understand about the lived experience of a Black man and a Black young man. And that's what, in so many ways, this conversation is one of the pinch points or most painful points for me, is that really kind of embracing and understanding the fact that whether you're 32, 42, 22, or 12, today in 2020, you're still having the same painful journey that the generation before had. And that's a heavy thing to wrap your head around, because we think we've done so much better. And maybe in a couple of data points we have done better, but so much better, we don't get that mark. I don't think. I just don't. Yes, I am growing, and I'm grateful. Like, I've gone to Juneteenth every year for the celebration at the park, every year for the last, well, let me be more accurate. Probably over the last 10 or 15 years, I have not missed more than a couple, but I may have missed a couple. But now all of a sudden, I love that everybody's talking about it, and but this year for me, it's different, right? Like, it doesn't matter that I've gone for a decade. Like, this year is different. I have a better understanding. I have more context. I have more, my heart is open. Like, I think that's the difference. I think our hearts are open.
And it doesn't mean, it doesn't mean before that, we were bad people, right? It just means that yes, there is what do they call it? The infinite capacity for love. Like, a heart has an infinite capacity for love. And I think that was Audre Lorde, right? But the idea that before it was like, okay, I'm gonna go to Indian Pueblo Cultural Center and I'm gonna see some dances to celebrate Native culture. And then I'm going to be done with that and go back to my life where I don't really have to think about that anymore, except for when something good or bad happens. And now to open our hearts and be like, you know what? One of my favorite terms is in Lakesh, right? You are my other me. So if it's happening to them, it actually is happening to me. It actually like we are connected, and I feel like those silos are coming down. And then it's like, okay, I'm not just going to support a Black cultural celebration because I'm obligated to in February, but to be able to say like, no, like that's a community celebration and I am part of that community. And so I feel like that's what's become interesting, and just to kind of put some language around this evolution you just talked about, to be like, now before I maybe went out of a sense of desire and somewhat obligation. And now I'm going because it's my fight too. Because it's my fight too.
It is our fight. It is our fight. Whether you come from the journey that I do, which is, been here my whole life, and I've become fond of saying that I am a man of color who doesn't present with color, right? Like, I am Hispanic. I did grow up with people calling my father a spick and making fun of his voice and the way he spoke. But I also grew up in a community where a lot of people loved him deeply, and he was cherished in Valencia County. And in fact, buried somebody yesterday who cherished my dad and knew my dad. And that's always special, because when you bury your father young, and as you did, Hakim, I mean, you were 41, but and I was a teenager, but 41 is still too young. I don't know where I was headed with that. I better just get back on.
You know where you headed? You were talking about dads, and it's Father's Day weekend. That's what you were headed. That's where you were.
I think that's what happened. It's Father's Day weekend, and I miss my dad a lot.
Yeah.
But my journey being a Hispanic Jew, my grandfather was Sephardic Jew, so we go back to Spain. Like, there's just no question. And my father from Puerto Rico. So on both sides of my family, I've got it. I mean, and let's be real here. My ancestors in Puerto Rico look a lot more like you than they look like me. right? Like
Yeah.
that's the native and indigenous people of Puerto Rico looked a lot like you, Hakim.
And
And
a lot of those Pan-African influences that you still see in Puerto Rico with the music, with the food, like all like in more ways than one, right?
that's
In
right.
more ways than one.
I think we can both love blood sausage. That morcilla is pretty good.
Yes, yes, amazing. There's a significant Puerto Rican population where in Philadelphia and South Jersey where I grew up. So yeah, good times, good memories.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Hey, let's talk. Let's bring it back around to. And you're getting so much love on Facebook. I can't even keep up here. Can you talk to me a little bit about? I know you've talked about being tired and exhausted, and 42 years in that pigmentation of yours, as you referred to it in some of your writings. Tell me about the exhaustion, yet the other side of the coin, which is this exhaustion at this moment in time actually has to, I would think, feel like probably one of the best investments you've ever been able to make in terms of providing a voice and a sense of what the lived experience is for a Black man, so that you can help us all be more enlightened and more empathetic with that empathy that you talked about earlier. Tell us about what it is to be Hakim Bellamy, and maybe in some ways like a Dave Chappelle of Albuquerque, right? Like he talks in his video, the 826, about him being Dave Chappelle, so he's not one of those Black men, right? Like he's not scary. Mm-hmm. You're not scary in some ways.
No, you're absolutely right, and it's been so like not this particular Cafecito, but I've turned down a lot of opportunities to speak in the last 3-4 weeks. And my main thing there is that like put the leaders that are doing the work in the community out front. Like, like this, we need more leaders in the Black community. We need more people to be recognized as leaders in the Black community. The tactic of gatekeeping so that there's only ever one, Oprah or Jordan at a time. That's by design. It's not that Black excellence is so rare. It's actually ubiquitous, but we don't give it enough opportunities to flourish and shine. And we take this kind of diversity tokenized approach where if I have a board, yes, I'm talking to all my nonprofit and foundation friends, as I have room for one Black person, and that's good enough because now our board is diverse. And so just like I've stepped back from lots of board invitations in the past 2 years, partially just because my job is a lot. It's a lot to work for the people for 50 to 60 hours a week and still get my son to soccer practice, right? So I just don't have the time, frankly. But lately also, with some of these invitations, it's like, have some other voices, because when I was first approached, I think my New Jersey me kind of came out right away, not the diplomatic Hakim, and they were like, well, how do you feel about this whole BLM thing now, Hakim? And I was like, I've been writing about institutional violence against Black people for 15 years. How do I feel? I feel like my body of work speaks for itself. Nothing has changed, right? That's how I feel. So I'm glad you all are late to the party, but I have been talking about this for a long time, right? Almost as a warning, right? Almost as a warning as to where we would be today, right?
I.e. Dave Chappelle, right? Like if you take a look at his early specials on Netflix or stand up, I think it was on Netflix, like in 17, which is now 3 years ago, he's talking about this violence, like in a very raw way.
I mean, one of the poems that's like, your old poems come back to haunt you. And you hope that when you write a poem about an incident, and you hope that we evolve and we awaken. And so I will never have to write about this again. That would be the ideal situation. That has not been, and I've even frankly benefited from it, moving out here when I did, and being part of a very small Black community, and being able to tell the stories of my lived experience in the world. It could have went north or south. It could have been like, oh, we don't get it. That's not true. I don't see it. Racism doesn't exist. Those people, same people don't believe in pandemics. And then, on the other side, like, or people who don't believe in science, right? But then like, you know, and then on the other side, you know, you have people kind of saying, wow, that is not my experience. And then they lean towards it and gravitate towards it. So I was fortunate that that was my experience as I came here talking about, you know, poems that are just like, I'm black, y'all, I'm black, y'all, I'm blackity black with black, black, y'all. And people not turning it off and saying, I don't get it, but actually leaning towards it and saying, I'm more interested in this experience. And so it would be disingenuous of me to say that I didn't benefit from being one of the, I don't even say rare black voices, I'll just say really loud black voices in Albuquerque when I got here. And people received it in a way that they didn't have to. You know, I've read poems in black cities, in Philly, and it's like that. My subject matter is not unique there; it is unique here, right? You know, but I will say this: what I've always been encouraged by, and I actually got to say this in the Courier Post when they interviewed me after I became Poet Laureate, which was the first time and only time I was ever on the front page of my hometown paper in South Jersey. So I was like calling friends. My mom had all the copies, like we like handing them out at Christmas. Amazing. And they asked me like, what do you write about? And I was like, I write about race and being a black man in this world, whenever that was, when I was 30 something. And they're like, and they like that in Albuquerque. And I was like, yeah, right. I was like, it's weird, right? I was like, but they totally get it. And I think they get it because they don't necessarily you don't have to come from a place of being black in America to understand liberation theory, to understand the ideology of oppressed people. And if we haven't learned anything in the past week, which what's been happening with the legacy of conquests in New Mexico, we've learned that they've been dealing with it a long time before this was America even. You know, and so it's like that's what they get. They get the freedom in your poems. They get the struggle and desire for freedom in your poems, the desire for love in spite of terrible things happening to you and your people and still being able to overcome. And that's what people got out of my work. And so I feel like that's great. Moving fast forwarding to what you're talking about now, I also know that fatigue comes from I have been writing about these things for 12 years. The poem I was referencing earlier that has haunted me lately and brought me to tears is the one I wrote after the Charleston church massacre. And just being like, you know, the way law enforcement treated him as opposed to the way that they treat us, whether you're just protesting or you are George Floyd, right? You know, George Floyd didn't kill nobody. This guy, like, killed people, right? And he got a very different treatment, right, than we did. And it's just, and those people were in the church, and I identify with the church. Both my parents are ministers, grew up in the church. My parents are from South Carolina. So like that was really personal. And that poem has been haunting me a lot lately because the disparity in how people are treated makes it feel like futile. It makes it feel like nothing's going to change. It's like I could, like, all the breath I still have that George Floyd doesn't, that I could put out into the world in a poem. It's kind of like, is that going to matter? Is that even going to do anything? Right. You know, and so that's where the fatigue comes from. Right. Like, you know, and I have intentionally kind of stepped back. It's even been hard to write. It's just been hard to process. I've written a few things lately, particularly about this moment in our history, because that's how I process and unpack, but nothing that I necessarily think, you know, I want to go stand up and read at a rally, because I just don't know. Yeah, it's more therapeutic right now than it is transformative, and that's just how it feels.
I appreciate that, and I really, it means the world to me that you said yes, because I do know that many have asked you to sit at the table and you've said no, and I appreciate you saying yes to me, and you always have. I mean, and your words on the front end of this Cafecito mean a lot to me. Those were not lost on me. To know that you feel like I poured into you and it mattered. That's one of the best items in my portfolio of pouring into others. So thank you for sharing that. Let me just ask you, the friendly reminder I included on the promotion for this, it struck me so deeply. I mean, all the images that you posted recently on that line of work were pretty powerful. About being a Black man and then the redundancy of the words. But the one that I used, I promoted Swear, which is your book, and I'll try and post a link to that, folks. You got to have it. It's a great collection of his poetry. But Black boys will never be children. that really struck me, especially you being a dad of a 12-year-old, me embracing so many, what I find in my world, somehow an overrepresentation of young Black men that I gravitate towards, trying to help on their journey. Tell me what that was about for you, and what emotion is behind that heavy depiction of that comment, Black boys will never be children.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. That's another, I dug that out last weekend when I was my family and I were trying to head to a BLM action in Santa Fe, and I got the days wrong. It's actually going to be today. But so we drove up there and then drove back. But that morning, I was looking for a different poem, haiku that my uncle had asked me about. My uncle we had a long conversation last weekend, like a 6-hour marathon call. My uncle Vic, and we're both Gemini, so we can really go with the talking. So we took it to the phone. But he was asking me about this haiku that he remembers me doing. That I was writing at an early point in my career where I was getting a lot of criticism from people, as you were talking about, well, the only reason people like his poetry is because it's hip hop and all he writes about is being Black, and he's not diverse, doesn't have a diverse catalog, and blah, 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 blah. And so, and I'm a young writer with a chip on my shoulder. So I do what young Black guys do. We played the dozens, and I started talking shit in my poetry. And so where the poem that came to was like, it's haiku, I think, I'll stop writing about how Black I am when you stop reminding me. 17 syllables, right? And so that's just kind of like, if you want me to write about something else, give me a different walk and experience in this world. If I didn't think that I was literally, if I didn't think that my life was in danger or at risk every day, then I could have the freedom of mind and resource and the absence of anxiety enough to think about something else besides being Black all the time. Because when I go out, people generally remind me that I'm Black all the time, right? And so that haiku came from that space, but it was published in a collection of haiku and American haiku, which, doesn't have to be 17 syllables. It can be less than 17 syllables. We joke because Americans are lazy, but it can be whatever as you want, like, or haikus, as I've called them. But that's where that one came. And then, the title, Just a Friendly Reminder, was sarcasm, friendly reminder. Black boys will never be children. And that was written after Trayvon Martin. And it was weird. At that time, my kind of long, ranty slam poems started turning into very brief, like, shots, just punches. Like, and I was really trying to really distill language to give an emotion, and at that time, Trayvon was 16, bag of Skittles, like we all remember. And, the same defense that George Zimmerman offered, I was scared for my life. Like, okay, you're a grown ass man, armed and scared of a 16-year-old. Cool. And it wasn't just because he was 16, because you didn't know how old he was. You just saw something that was scary. Well, that's the same thing, Darren, whatever, you got the guy that shot Mike Brown as a police officer who, police officers are ostensibly brave, but they're always scared when Black guys come around. So it's just like, I don't know what to do with that. And so where I landed was that, like, no matter how, Tamir Rice was 12. Right? Like, no matter my son's age, right? Like, my son is not scary. I don't care. Like, if you're a grown man, my son's not scary. I'm sorry. Like, and he's a big dude, like, and so they're not scared of the people. They're scared of the idea of Blackness. They're scared of what we represent. And frankly, they're guilty. They feel guilty because the original sin in this country was that its wealth was built on the Black backs and death of people of color, and not just Black people. And so I think that's scarier. Like, reckoning with that is scarier than having to deal with, someone's own kind of physical impression of danger in front of them. That there's just like, there's this back of mind idea that one day we're going to want retribution. and I feel like that was the question that they asked Dr. King on Meet the Press. The reporter kind of asked Dr. King, when are you going to be happy, King? They like to antagonize him because he was a peaceful guy, so they always try to get under his skin. And they're like, you won't be happy until you've now subjugated and oppressed white people. Is that your goal, King? And in his way, because he's always thought real, like, long pregnant pause before he spoke, and spoke very slow. And he kind of looked down and looked up at him, and he was like, I wouldn't do that because that would make me just as bad as you. That is not what we're looking for. We're not looking for retribution. We're looking for parity and equality and humanity, you know? And so I just feel like that all those dynamics come into play when a grown ass man with a gun is standing across 10 yards from a 12-year-old or 16-year-old boy. And so if that's the case, for us to survive, we have to be, we don't get to always play and make mistakes. We don't get to, you know, we don't get to have the same forgiveness for our misgivings as people of lighter pigment do, because it could be life or death. So we just always have to be wise beyond our years at a very young age. And that's unfortunate because that's robbing young Black kids of their childhood.
It's heavy. I appreciate that. And thanks for adding the texture behind that very powerful image about Black boys never being able to be children. And hopefully we're changing that. We're changing that with these kinds of conversations, and we're changing that with the national dialogue, and we're changing that as we have a very different Juneteenth this year.
I know you had Devontae, I call him Dr. Watson. I know you had Dr. Watson on, and he gave you the download on Juneteenth. Some of the things I've learned, because there's always more to learn, is that this was, I think NPR taught me this yesterday, that in the first Juneteenth, one of the big things is, you know, Black folk, you know, we're always known for our fashion savvy. And part of that is because we weren't allowed to, like under the slave codes, you weren't allowed to ever get dressed up, and certainly not dress better than your owners or your masters, even when they did their hush harbor preaching, you know, underground church on Sundays and things like that. And so one of the things about Juneteenth was like, that was the first time, especially in Texas, that Black folk got to really strut their stuff and put on their Sunday's best, if you will. And so when y'all go out today, don't go out there looking, you know, off base. Try to wear some, you know, patent leather shoes or something with some shine on them, because if you want to really support the legacy of Juneteenth, you got to turn up. So
turn up and turn out.
Yes.
So we appreciate that. Yes, indeed. And that's very powerful. Hakim, can you, you know, I think when this gets back to something I started earlier, but maybe, you know, when people see you in Albuquerque, they're not scared because they know you and they've heard you and they've seen your poetry slam, and you're the Albuquerque Poet Laureate, and you're in leadership for the city, and you're on all these nonprofit boards, and we feel like we know you because we see you on social media, and I feel like I know you pretty well. I've poured into you, I've believed in you, you've inspired me, but yet I've never said, Hakim, in your time in Albuquerque, tell me about those times of discomfort when you knew that you were experiencing racism in a community that you've deeply loved and that you've invested in. And I think it's important that we know that even Black men of what I'll call prominence, if that's okay, or notoriety, maybe I don't know what the exact right word is, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. But even you've had a journey that includes moments of pain because you, in this community that you have been an ambassador for. We are the city. You talked about that earlier, and I posted your link for your manifesto about this city. So you write a manifesto about this city, about how phenomenal it is and how phenomenal we are and how phenomenal we are together. Yet I know that there is still the underbelly that we have failed to talk about, which has partially been why we're still where we are today in 2020.
You know, two things there, Brian, and thank you for, I went way over here and forgot the other half of your question, but two things there. A, I am no Dave Chappelle, but B, you know, Dave Chappelle also came here to Santa Fe like 5 years ago and got heckled from the stage at the Lensic, and this kid throws a banana peel on stage, right? And so the legacy of racism in this country is always reminding, kind of similar to the short poem, always reminding Black men that you are boys, that, you know, and that used to be a very pejorative term to say like, hey boy, get over here. Like, and you're talking to a 60-year-old Black man, right? And so there's this, it's kind of like when, for my sports fans, all the fervor over LeBron James leaving Cleveland, whether you're a LeBron James fan or not, they spray painted NIGGER on his garage. Like, you know, so really it's a constant reminder that no matter how rich and famous you get in this country, there's always some element of it that wants to put you in your place. And so it is a double-edged sword, the notoriety, because that poem you're talking about, the manifesto, I remember when it came out, and that was also We Are This City. When it came out, and you know, this is anybody who is a public figure of any sort, you know, the worst thing you can do is read the comments in any feed. And it's not because you're trying to insulate yourself from criticism. It's just because anybody who has a spine will criticize you to your face. And that's why you just stay out of the feed, right? So the other piece was like, okay, all the first comments were like, we be, what, we can't speak proper English? What? Oh, everything's getting taken over by hip hop. And then my favorite comment was, niggers are taking over Albuquerque. So those were the comments on the poem, right? You know, in the piece. And if you're a writer who releases your work publicly, you know that half the public's gonna like it, half the public's not gonna like it. So you get real comfortable with criticism and rejection. But when it gets past criticism of the artwork and turns into criticism of who you are as an individual, it's painful. It's painful when, you know, it's a love poem to your city, and your city decides, elements of your city decide they don't love you back. That's always painful, that unrequited love. But I also say, like, you know, there's people that are more visible for different reasons than me, like most of the UNM basketball and football team, who always have running with the police. You know, I'm not going to say I haven't had running the police in this community and in this town, you know, and been fortunate to be here today to still talk about it, right? You know, and so it's just like, you know, that those things you never think, just because people know you, that it's going to change, especially in the dark on the side of a road. Like, it doesn't really matter, like, you know, because what happens here, that's going to be that will or won't be on the news tomorrow, is just between these two human beings right now. And in that moment, it doesn't matter who Hakim Bellamy is. It doesn't matter who Hakim Bellamy is in that moment. So,
as we wrap up, you know, you've been generous in your words about our friendship and our relationship, but I guess what I'd love to do is kind of just take a couple minutes to get your perspective, having been through 42 years, but more importantly, in the context of the last 3-4 weeks. What's your guidance, and which will also come with inspiration, I know, because it's who you are, to those of us that want to be better allies, that want to get it right, that want to make sure this isn't just a moment in time, but that it is a stark contrast from when we said no more, that enough's enough. Enough's enough of saying there's not enough for the African-American community. Enough's enough for violence that we remember for a week and then go on to the next news cycle. Enough is enough, and enough is enough of looking the other way. Like, for so long, we just, in many ways, we looked the other way, and we didn't reconcile what was right before our very eyes. What are your words to those of us that want to be better allies?
You know, and I don't know, maybe this is not inspirational. Maybe it still comes from a space of fatigue in some ways. But I will always remember, and I'm gonna leave their names out because I didn't ask to share their names here. But I was part of a leadership institute initiative here in New Mexico, for people, you know, left of center, if you will, because I'm not afraid to say I'm left of center, like, you know, that were and bringing us together to kind of help people who were very deep in their own work in different social justice and nonprofits and activism work, and kind of say, you know, it's better for the sector if, like, since I did work with juveniles and juvenile justice, that I knew what was happening in the environmental movement in our state, that I knew what was happening in the education movement, and language preservations for Native tribes. Like, we should all be aware of each other's work and what we're doing. At least we're not going to be experts, but know at least enough so that when you see people pop up for elected office or calling for support on different actions and campaigns, you know enough to go, oh, they share my values, I should care about this too, right? Like, you know, the other side of the aisle does a great job building a pipeline of talent that is connected and well networked, and generally, I personally feel like the left doesn't. But so I'm in this institute with these folks, and they're talking about land. And we have a fishbowl conversation is what we called it. So 3 people in the middle talking about land and the rest of the cohort around it, just listening. And it's somebody representing indigenous tribal land sovereignty. It's someone addressing more land grants, like Spanish land grants. And then it's like the conservation folks, which is the current, U.S. government and occupation of lands. So BLM, right? Not that BLM, the other BLM, right? Bureau of Land Management, and so the state park system. The state park system is an oppressive construct, right? But and I'm glad we have state parks and national parks. So, but it's also land theft, right? And so these 3 people.
What do you mean by that? I actually want you to go into that a little bit. Well, that's a heavy.
Yeah. And what I mean by that is that there are certain, specifically tribes that still consider the United States as like an occupation of territory. So when that regime or government comes into play and then puts restrictions on land and space, especially when it gets in the way of tribal ceremonies and things of that sort, and you have to play by the rules of the government that you actually don't acknowledge, it becomes this now. But for the benefit of, ostensibly for the benefit of all people to have access to public lands, but it's like, okay, but how did you get those public lands? And so the whole concept becomes in question and interrogated in that space. And so you have these 3 different stakeholders and perspectives at the table, and they're going at it for about an hour and a half, and then they get stopped, and then they kind of ask the larger room what questions they have, and you can hear a pin drop because the complexity of the history had gotten so big that we actually lost sight of the original question. And one person who is a trusted and respected voice for tribes in this state raises their hand, we'll keep it non-gendered, raises their hand and says, well, this is all good and well and all. It's philosophical. It's good philosophical conversation, but we are not actually having a real conversation about healing this generational wound of land ownership until we start talking about people having to give up land. No one wants to talk about having to give up land. Everybody wants to talk about new rules and new allocations, but when it's like, and this person is like, really trying to go back to that original sin and say, like, we're all comfortable. All of us have benefited. We've benefited from generations. This house, this land's been in my family for generations. It's mine. My parents, my grandparents worked hard for it. But there was something that happened before that. And unless we talk about that, it is purely an intellectual and sometimes kind of self-congratulatory exercise, right? And so I feel like that's where, to bring it back home, I feel like that's where we have to be as allies and as, African peoples. We have to really be wanting to dig in. Like we do demand changes now. Like ceasing state violence against Black men is an urgent proposition, and we collectively can stop that tomorrow. But there's going to be work on the other side of that for 2 or 3 more years if we really want to do truth and reconciliation, if we really want to heal. I've just had a conversation this week in my work life connected to what's happening with the La Jornada statue. Right. And that deep wound in this community. And the folks who were talking to were saying, what about a Truth and Reconciliation Commission like they did in South Africa? And I'm like, it's funny you mentioned that because I had the opportunity to go to South Africa in 2012. And when I was there, I marveled at the race dynamics that I would see on the street. And then not that they were perfect, like let's not kumbaya South Africa. They still have issues, even though there's the majority Black leadership now as well. But just seeing the people interact and knowing that there is a racial history and dynamics of people in the street, they're not further ahead nor behind where we are right now. And apartheid only ended 30 years ago then at the time. So how come they've been able to advance their community as far as race relations in 30 years, what we haven't managed to do in 300? It's because they looked it in the face and they made it a countrywide conversation and they talked about it. And even when you talk to South Africans on the street, they know more about the history of race in their country than the average American you will speak to here. And so it's like, we got to do the work, and the work's going to take a long time. So I guess my only advice is to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because that's the only way we're not going to be here 2 years from now. So
I love that. And I think that's really good advice. And that's why I've talked about these conversations of being difficult dialogues or uncomfortable conversations. Mm-hmm. Because you know, I have to own my part in this, and whether that's just not necessarily. Um, I mean, look, people have said, how are you getting all these trusted Black voices? How are you contacting them? I'm like, I've had this community in my iPhone for 20 years. Like, you are my community, and I say that not to congratulate myself or hurt my shoulder as I pat myself on the back, but I say that to say this, which is, but I still got my role, because it's not until now that I've had conversations that are uncomfortable with all these Black women and Black men who I love and trust and have loved and trusted for 20 years, but have never allowed them to share with me in a way that has made me own my part.
And that's where we have to be a little more brave. You know, I know I at length talked about the fatigue, and actually like having in this kind of iteration of Black Lives Matter, trying to step back. You know, I've done anti-racism training. Like my buddy Carlos Contreras and I did a whole curriculum, thanks to Kendra at Mount Mahogany Charter School with 7th graders. Like I helped facilitate a conversation in Santa Fe with folks from the community after the Dave Chappelle incident as a healing, you know, meeting in circle. And this go around, I'm really like, you know what, as a Black man in America, I didn't make racism, so I don't have the cure or the owner's manual on how to fix it and dismantle it and take it apart. Like, I've done as much as I could do for a long time about trying to get us to come to a place of understanding so we can move forward. And I'm not gonna say it hasn't worked. It has worked in an interpersonal way, but it hasn't been enough to change systems. And right now, we're not looking for interpersonal ways to make each other feel better. We're trying to dismantle systems, and it's hard to ask the person who is the victim to also solve the problem. Like, we didn't make racism, so it's not our job to break it. That's where we really need that work to happen. You know, it starts at the dinner table with your family, because you're related to somebody who's in a position of power. And those are the people that you need to lean on and make sure that they don't let this moment pass without figuring out what they can do in their sphere of influence to make sure it's structurally different moving forward.
That's beautiful. And I'm totally taking advantage of you right now, because I just don't want this conversation to end. I love you so much, and I think I learned so much from you. I would just say that I think that what you just said there at the end is so powerful, which is about accountability. And it's about understanding that we have to hold those who we are in close relationship with accountable for their part in identifying the path for solutions. Something that was said earlier this week, or last week, I should say, was stark for me, was like, how is it to be a Black man? And it was kind of rhetorical. And it says, how is it to be a Black man who wakes up every day in the world where you are perceived to be the problem?
Yes.
Holy cow. Like, that is like, I could feel that. And I'd never really thought of it that way.
Oh, that's one of my favorite, for everybody. If we're looking for resources, right? The anti-racism toolkit reading list. Let me just throw out there W.E.B. Du Bois, because Dr. Du Bois, who's also one of the founders of NAACP and the Niagara movement, he talked about the dual consciousness of the Negro, like in 1863. His seminal work is The Souls of Black Folk. And for my Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity brothers, it's required reading if you're going to be a brother in the Alpha Alpha fraternity. So yeah. I read it in college. But
we sold a couple of copies of Swear this morning, by the way.
Bless y'all hearts.
And I got some other the reading list for Du Bois.
I got some other new work cooking. That work is 8 years old now. So I don't know if it's a proper representation of how I've evolved as a writer, but there's some oldie but goodies in there. But I definitely thinking of Du Bois talking about the dual consciousness of the Negro, and that, you know, he starts out The Souls of Black Folk kind of saying the most urgent and pressing question of the day, and that day being the 1800s, is the Negro problem. Right, you know, and later I think Frederick Douglass went along to call it the problem of the color line, because there literally was a line, right, the Mason-Dixon line across the country that, like, you know, but then he goes to great lengths in that opening chapter or introductory chapter to talk about, like, if the Negro problem, like, our country is going to war over this, right? People want to pretend the Civil War wasn't about slaves. it was about states' rights, but I say always complete the sentence: states' rights to own slaves. So, he was saying they're fighting over you, they're fighting about you. What does that do to a person to kind of be like, so I'm the problem and I'm the problem, right? Like, you know, and how does that make me feel? You know, that it doesn't really make me feel American, right? It makes me feel like I'm the reason the country's falling apart. And that feeling is right now, it's pervasive to this day. The people who are trying to have an argument over riots and property versus riots and people have made a conscious decision to say that my things are more important than your life. So like, we can't be friends. Like, we don't agree. We don't have the same values if that's what you believe. And then I went to greater lengths to say, and remember when we were your property, you treated us like shit. So don't pretend your property matters now. Right. You know, and so that there's just so many dichotomies and contradictions in you know, American rhetoric, especially in these times when it's hard to find out what's real. You know?
When did Hakim Bellamy first feel that way? When did you realize that in this equation of life that you were somehow the problem? Like, how does that hit you? And do you remember, and when did you start feeling this?
I remember very vividly. My parents were very, my mom especially, you know, was very politically aware. My dad was too, and my dad was definitely, you know, my dad was busy building the family and building a house, and they both worked in computer science. But my mom was definitely a little bit more of the radical one, and you know, and then later it flipped because Dad started a church, and for anybody who knows what it's like to start a small church and really be the center of a community, both spiritually and economically, that's radical work, which is why we've always had preachers at the forefront of civil rights movements, you know. But in the early times, it was mostly Mom, and Mom was like a big student of like the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense and Stokely Carmichael, and we like listened to those talks and like playing on records growing up. As radical and political as the comedy of like Red Fox and folks like that. So all that was always in the background in the chatter of my house. And then I remember when I was 16, we had moved from Philly to the suburbs. Not 16, younger than that. I was playing basketball at the neighborhood across the street with my buddies, and we were a mixed group. Jimmy was white, Keithel was Black, Mike was mixed. So we were like a mixed motley group of kids just shooting hoops. And there was a little house cat a corner to us where this, you know, younger woman had moved in, and we all remember it because we thought she was gorgeous. But she like seemed single, and she had this Jeep, and the Jeep, one of the Jeep without the top things. You could just like, and so one day her purse came up missing, and she was trying to figure out who did it. And she had seen us, like we were wont to do, be over there playing basketball. And cops show up at my house with like, my mom is like, yeah, your son's been identified as being with a group of kids over here. This lady can't find her purse, and she thinks that, you know, your son might have it. So my mom, first thing she asked him was like, did you go to the other kids? You asked the other kids? No, we started with you guys. Okay, why don't you start with the other kids? Nah, fumble. Oh, we got to start somewhere, man. We're going to talk to them after we talk to your son. Can we have a word with him outside? She's like, no, and you can't come in my house. Right. And my mom was a paralegal, so she knew the law. like you can't go in the house unless you have just cause. You might have to go get a warrant to figure out if my son stole this lady's purse. But she's like, and frankly, we're too riled up right now to have this conversation. Now, this is great for a middle-aged Black woman who is a paralegal and now lives in the suburbs. So I imagine my comrades in the inner city don't exactly have that kind of agency that my mom had at that time. So that's my privilege. But sure enough, like before they even come back, because they never come back with the warrant, because the next day the lady finds her purse and calls, you know, cancels her whatever police complaint. And my mom calls the Winslow Police Department and says, you owe my son an apology. And did I ever get the apology? No. So I just knew in that moment, I was like, you know, if I'm in trouble when I don't even do anything, imagine how much trouble I'm in if I actually do something, right? You know, and my mom, to her credit, and I have a poem about it that Katie Stone is going to play tomorrow on the Children's Hour. Thanks, Katie Stone.
We love Katie Stone. We love Children's Hour.
Thank you, Katie Stone. Children's Hour about or was it today? I guess it was today. I guess it's right now. I guess it's Children's Hour.
Yes, it's right now.
Like, you know, about just about having the conversation with your son. And it is the conversation. Like, it's like the sex talk. Like, did you have the talk? Like, most parents have that talk. If, you know, some don't, some run from that talk too. And that's why we're not going to talk about why we have so many unplanned pregnancies in our country. But like, because if we're afraid to talk about sex, we're like, because Puritans, then we're afraid to talk about race, and then those are the problems that will persist until you face them, right? And so the talk with the young Black men really is around. This is why when my mom would say, when you and your friends get pulled over, they can hop out the car and read the riot act to the police, especially if they're white. They'll be just fine. You put your hands on the wheel and you shut up and don't say nothing, because you don't get treated the same, and that's by authorities. Those are our authorities. So if our authorities don't see me as equal to my counterparts, it feels lonely. It feels like you're on your own, so.
Look, I just, you're not alone. And I'm so grateful for you, and I'm grateful for your candor today. And thank you for sharing that story with us and that moment in time. And it's just, you don't think you're privileged. I hope you'll just watch these episodes of Cafecito con Colon, because you'll start to understand the systemic issues with what it is to grow up to be a Black man or a Black woman, a person of color, or Native American who is treated as less than or invisible. And then I challenge you, like, how can you not hear these stories? How can you not listen to these lived experiences and not want to be an ally and to say that Black lives matter? And I'm grateful that I have been able to grow. I just think about where I was 10 years ago and where I am today, and it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing because you think you're enlightened, you think you're smart, you think you're involved, you think you get it. And then you look back and you go, I wasn't even close to doing enough and to doing the right thing. And so for your role in that, Hakim, thank you for helping me learn. Thank you for helping me know better so that I could be better and do better. And thank you for taking so much time with me this morning. It'll be the longest episode of Cafecito con Colon, because I love you so much. I don't want to let you go, and I could keep talking to you for the 6 hours that your Gemini spirit would give me. But we want to land the plane and sign off and let you get to your day. I know it's a busy day for Juneteenth. We know that lots of opportunities to engage and be enriched. And I want to give you the last word. You deserve it. You earned it. And you are never alone, because I'm always right here. And I love you very much. And I love what you've done for our community. And you're a great dad to a beautiful preteen. And
who's still not up. These kids, I tell you what, Brian.
I got a 22-year-old. He's still in there. He's still in the bedroom. Like
I must be getting old, because I can't sleep for like more than 6 hours anymore. And
I'm with you. Hey, speaking of kids and Ben and your son, I think your fiance's son's name is Ben, right?
Max.
No, I'm sorry. No, it's Max. I knew it was 3 letters. I was close.
You're close. Yeah.
So when's the big date?
You know what? We originally wanted to do that. Well, my
Angela,
dad.
Hang on. I'll be right with you, Angela.
Okay.
Good morning. We originally wanted to do it on the anniversary of my dad's passing, which would be July 16th. But it's hard for people to travel right now. We don't want my mom, mainly because she's older and at risk, to travel to. We were going to go to South Carolina, where my dad was raised and grew up. And try to do something on the water there, something real small. And then, but her now asking her mom to travel as well, like it just doesn't feel like the right thing to do in a pandemic. I know people are having pandemic weddings, and that's awesome, but trying to show care for our elders and ourselves. And so we decided to put the date off indefinitely until people can like actually gather. And so, yeah, so that's what we know right now. But yeah, the plan was to, because Dad's unable to be there, to do it on his day, in his space. But yeah, he'll be there. He'll be there no matter where it is, right?
That's right. I can assure you, having been on this journey and you'll hit this moment, but This is the year when I am actually, I've outlived my father's journey. He was 49 when he passed away, and now I'm in my 50th year. But there's not a day that goes by that I don't feel like he's with me, and still trying to make him proud, like I try to make my hometown, my community, Valencia County, proud. I yearn for your approval. Who was it that I was talking to the other day that's so heavy with me? It's not. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's Charles, actually. I think I was candid on one of these episodes and just said, I have always worked to get Charles' nod of approval. And I don't know why, but you're just super important to me. Thank you. We'll be thinking of you on July 16th, and we'll be looking forward to celebrating your wedding when it happens. Thank you for being a civil servant and putting aside your agenda and where you were headed in education, in educating others, and saying that you're going to lead in the city. Because boy, Patricia L. Chavez and Ralph Arianes and all the leaders that I've served with this, over the years in the Hispanic community, the intersectionality of our Native Americans journey and the African American journey and the Hispanic journey, and the multicultural landscape of New Mexico needs people like you who can listen and also be a trusted voice. And I think that people are one or the other often, and very few people are both. And you are both, my friend. And I'm grateful for you.
That's I got a lot more of that work to do here in the coming weeks, months, and years. So yeah, I'll try to live up to that as well.
Thank you.
Poets are natural listeners. I say be wary of poets who pretend that everything that they write comes from the well inside of them. I think most poets beg, steal, and borrow from the things around them, and a lot of that for me is listening. What do they say? You have two eyes and two ears and one mouth, so you look and listen twice as much as you talk. So I try to get as much input before I try to figure out what my little bit of output is going to be. So.
Well, that little bit of output makes a huge difference in this community. I'm just grateful for that, and we'll keep at it. I'm going to have the Brigadier General Ralph on here on Monday. So we've got, I think he was the first African American Brigadier General out here in our guard, and just a phenomenal human being who makes a difference every day. He'll be with us on Monday for Cafecito, and I just want to, where are you going to be at today? Are you going to be out at the park today? Are you going
trying to get to Roosevelt? Yeah, this evening. I know the virtual Juneteenth celebration that actually the city we're hosting on GovTV. We're airing it on GovTV, so channel 16, Comcast channel 16. You want to watch at home, but that one is there's going to be a series of performances, think like a telethon kind of deal, spoken word, music, live music, but they're doing that at an undisclosed location and broadcasting it on the air. That's the virtual celebration, I think from 12 to 5. And then at 5 and forward, there's a physical celebration in Roosevelt Park. For those who feel like, you're not risking your life to do it, please be properly social distanced and wash your hands frequently.
Yes, absolutely. So awesome. And I want to get this right. Raphael's was the first Black in the history of the New Mexico Guard to hit battalion command, colonel rank, and then brigadier general rank. Phenomenal guy, Raphael Warren, our general, and he will be with us on Monday. And we can reflect upon this Juneteenth weekend celebration, whether you do it virtually, which I'm going to do a bit here, or whether you make it out to the park. Just know that we are celebrating. Thank you to my friends in McKinley County who gave me my Juneteenth celebration shirt last night. And thank you most especially to my friend. I love you, Hakim, and I'm always with you. You are never alone. And we owe a debt of gratitude to you for being a civil servant who makes a difference every day in the city of Albuquerque.
I love my city. Happy to do it.
Thank you, my friend. And sorry for our show getting stepped on. You'll laugh. As you know, I love to pour in to others, and I have a 10:30 that she was early because she knows I'm never late, and she showed up early. My young woman of color who I mentor, we've got a Zoom meeting scheduled for 10:30, and so she jumped on the same line because it's my room.
That's all right. That's all right. That sounds like that's real business. Let's handle that.
We're gonna go do that. With that, I want to say thanks to everybody who tuned in. We kept over 50 people for an hour and a half nearly, and I don't think any guest has ever done that because we've never gone this long on Cafecito con Colon. So thanks for being so generous with your time, Hakim. Please take some time to go back and read those comments and then screenshot them for those tough days because there's a lot of love on this feed for you. And we appreciate you. Make it a great day, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. God bless you, Albuquerque. Thank you for joining us. Make sure you get out there, learn your story, but most importantly, reach out to 3 people of color who may be in isolation. Make sure they know that they're not alone and ask them to tell you about their lived experience. You'll be a better person for it. I know I am. I'm a better person for having asked Hakim about his lived experience. And go out there. Happy Juneteenth. See you soon on Monday. Bye, Hakim.
Bye. Thank you, Brian.
You bet.